Didn't get everything you wanted this holiday season? Spring Creek Model Trains can help. With a huge inventory featuring today's top manufacturers, Spring Creek Model Trains is sure to have just what you're looking for. Check them out in Deschler, Nebraska, on their website, springcreekmodeltrains.com, or come shop their huge selection at the Railroad Hobby Show in the Stroh Building, January 24th and 25th in West Springfield, Massachusetts. Or give them a call at 402-365-7628. If you're looking to bring more realism to your layout industries, the place to go is the Railroad Hobby Show in West Springfield, Massachusetts to see Tully models. You'll find Kevin in the Mallory Building with a wide variety of products from Industrial Modeler Supply and Southern Tier Grain Modeler Supply, including new announcements to take your trackside industries to the next level. For more, check out their website at tullymodels.com. ATLP Extra is our monthly newsletter delivered right to your inbox each month. Sign up for free at atlpextra.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott. So glad you could join us. On this episode, we're going to be talking about the evolution of model railroading, and joining me to do that, Paul Stamp. Paul, welcome back.
Hey, Ray, thanks for having me back on. Really excited to be back in the studio with you.
Great to have you back in the studio, but this is not the first time I've been seeing you on my monitor lately. I've been checking out your Monday Night Live. You've been doing like a live feed, kind of partnering with Dennis Colucci. You kind of go, I think, after or before or after Dennis.
Yeah, I'm on before Dennis. I like to joke that I'm his opening act, but we both have a blast on Monday nights, live streaming on YouTube. Right now, working on a couple of custom painted SD40-2s. And I mean, you can find me anywhere in the basement pretty much on Monday night, either running trains, working on something at the workbench, or just talking trains.
Yeah, my Monday night is pretty full of YouTube live streaming. We have the On the Tracks Monday folks that are up in Canada with Trackside Mike and James from Dundas Junction. And then you have yourself. You've got Dennis Colucci to wrap up on Monday night. And then Tuesday night, we do our operating crew chat, so I don't get over to the live streaming. Then back onto live streaming on Wednesday with Heath Hurwitz. And there's plenty of live streams going on Thursdays, and then I catch something else on Friday. It's a loaded full, and it's amazing all these great live streams. Oh, Ted DiIorio with Saturday Night Weathering. It's great. I mean, there's just so much content out there, and you're one of the people that are helping contribute to that.
Yeah, it's a blast to be a part of the YouTube live streaming community. I think we've got our own really wonderful community of model railroaders building specifically in the live streaming genre.
Yeah, and it's a two-way conversation. You have the presenter obviously talking about what they're doing, but then the chat room shares a lot of great information as well. It's really a great forum to be able to share that information and right at your fingertips.
Yeah, and I tell my chat all the time that I'm no expert, and I usually end up learning quite a few things from the chat itself. Just that helps me become a better model railroader, helps me with the things that I'm working on. And I usually end up getting better results for having people there watching over my shoulder and suggesting, better tips to get better models.
I know that this is going to eventually come up, and I think it's a great segue into tonight's topic, which is the evolution of model railroading. And I know that a lot of the evolution, the current evolution in current model railroaders have really been driven by the social media aspect that's entered and is a mainstay in our hobby, and has become such a useful tool to be able to share information. It doesn't come the way it used to come. It is now a plethora of information. There's not a whole lot you can't find information on now, or know somebody that knows somebody who knows it, and the community just becomes even tighter, and really to be thanked by the connectivity that we have electronically through social media and YouTube and the like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things we'll kind of get into as far as my presentation is concerned is how much easier it is nowadays to build trust in a modeler that you're seeing online compared to what it used to be with a guy, at the local club that you only saw once a week. A lot of these people that you're seeing online very regularly, 2-3 times a week, that sort of thing. And you're seeing the results that they get based on the methods that they're using, which makes it a lot easier to build trust with somebody online, as strange as that sounds, compared to, the guy that's describing things in thin air at the local club.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. And, I think that's also a great point that you're talking about. You get to see their modeling as it happens versus the person that says they know it, but then you find out they really didn't. They just kind of knew somebody who's told them that once upon a time. That, it gives a lot of great credibility. Right.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about the evolution of model railroading. I like to use that phrase that model railroading isn't dying, it's evolving. I truly believe that. Let's talk a little bit about what we're starting to see as the beginnings of the evolution of model railroading from the traditional, I guess, sense, that we saw through the 80s, 90s, 2000s, to where we are now. Let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges this becomes the new way to model railroad.
Yeah. So, that's the perfect place to start is with the challenges that our younger modelers are facing. So it's important to acknowledge the struggles that a younger modeler is facing compared to older generations. And that's not to say it's a competition. Modelers of every generation face a set of challenges, and it's not that one is worse than the other. It's just that they're different. And today's generation of modelers is facing some pretty tough financial ones. The housing market itself has outpaced wage growth by over 100%, and the cost of a college degree has outpaced wage growth by 169%. This means that the average modeler is likely not going to be able to move into their first home and get that basement and be able to build a layout until they reach the age of 40 years old. That is officially, as of 2025, the average age of the first-time home buyer in the United States.
So what does that do? How does a younger model railroader adapt to those challenges?
Yeah, so the ways that they're adapting are finding ways to model in less space. They're likely spending a little bit more time living at home with mom and dad or in an apartment. They've got less disposable income, so they've got to find ways to be creative. Those outlets look like portable layouts. They look like modular layouts that are, you bring them to a meet and connect them together and become a part of a larger layout. Smaller layouts are a big part of it, but sometimes modelers have no layouts at all, and they belong to a club and they do their modeling at home. But when they get to the club, they want to run because they don't have a place to run at home, but they've got all these gorgeously weathered and custom painted locomotives and freight cars that they're so excited to see turn wheels.
Another part that you talked about is the financial aspect of this, where there's income challenges. How are younger folks adapting to the kind of financial challenges? We see prices increase. There's no secret there, and especially lately with the challenges of tariffs, and the cost of model railroading has certainly increased. How is that all coming together?
Yeah, it's definitely becoming a challenge to buy brand new out of the box models. That's for sure. The prices of new stuff, is probably fair. There's some incredible detail that's coming out of this brand new stuff out of companies like Rapido and Scale Trains. The detail is insane, but it's not always attainable for a younger modeler. So they might be looking towards stuff like super detailing, and it's kind of a tough niche there as well. If you look at the breakdown of the cost of just super detailing an Accurail kit, for example, you're looking at a price tag with all of the parts that just include like Kadee metal knuckle couplers, Intermountain wheel sets, and a Plano etched metal roof walk. You're already looking at a price for that car that's more than an Athearn Genesis level covered hopper of the same make and model. So it's kind of a tight tightrope to walk. You're really deal hunting is the best way to describe it, as far as getting freight cars and locomotives, and got to be willing to put in a little bit of work to make sure that they're what what you want them to be. But that's something that really hasn't changed in the hobby. We've been super detailing and custom painting and those sorts of things for years. And that's not something that's changed. The way that we're going about getting those details, though, may have changed just a little bit.
Let's talk about super detailing and rivet counting a little bit. It seems to me as the younger generation comes up, I mean, there's a lot of older generation folks that really know this really deep inside baseball information, but it seems more and more the younger generation and what they know and what they see and what they're modeling is becoming like super laser focused. And it's got to be the internet, right? It's got to be this amazing access to all this data that's driving it, wouldn't it be?
The access to whatever it is that you want to model is right at your fingertips with the internet, right? So if somebody's interested in, let's take me for example, B23-7s in the Finger Lakes Railway. Well, I've got an entire arsenal of photos for reference that I can go check out right at my fingertips at places like Railroad Picture Archives and places like that. So I can drill down into doing, the road number specific detail that maybe I couldn't before. There's locomotives on the Finger Lakes that have high hood chop noses, and they have a very different appearance from the normal B23-7s. And that's not something that you get to know unless you've got those sorts of pictures and reference images at your fingertips.
It blows me away. I mean, I love spending time with younger folks, and then I just start thinking, like, how do you know all this stuff? I mean, you know every rivet of a locomotive, just by looking at it, the exact model of a piece of rolling stock. I don't know the differences. I'm digging through pictures and still trying to figure it out. And there's a lot of younger folks that can just rattle that stuff off. It's really amazing that the depth of knowledge.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that they've grown up being able to learn about this online from different resources. Yeah,
and it certainly seems to be reflecting in the modeling, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's certainly reflecting in the modeling. The ability to super detail is limited only by your ability to see what's on a model at this point. If there's not a detail part out there for you, you've got the ability to 3D print it. And that's certainly happening as well. I've got a friend named Garrett who I mentioned quite heavily in my presentation. He's got a Finger Lakes Railway caboose that he couldn't find detail parts for anywhere. So he just went out and did the best he could to measure what he could and 3D printed them himself. And now he's got a dead-on accurate version of the Finger Lakes Railway transfer caboose. It's pretty incredible that you're able to get the very, very specific down to the road number specific detail when you're doing super detailing these days.
Yeah, now translate all that over to the fact that you mentioned that age 40 is when you're starting to see the average homeowner now purchase their first home. So for a good portion of their life, or really kind of the first half or so of somebody's life, they're not even in a home that they own. They're either with their parents or they're in an apartment in smaller places. So now it's less is more, right? And again, you talk about these modules and you talk about that. It sounds like that helps drive the laser focus as well.
Yeah, less is more. You've got more time to spend on super detailing, on custom painting, on 3D printing the detail parts that you need. So the time is there. It's the money and the space factors that are really what's limiting modelers these days, which it's not as prohibitive as it may seem. It just means that modelers are pivoting to doing different things within the hobby.
Yeah, let's talk about that pivot because, again, I think that's where an older generation looks and they say, oh, they're not doing the things that I used to do. And I think maybe one of those is the bigger layout builds and scratch building right from the beginning, or even buying kits and assembling them. But that's not really this generation. I think they, at least from what I've seen, it's more about getting something that has a little bit more instant gratification, but then just going buck wild on all of the detail and really driving that fidelity level up.
Yeah, so if you want to look at, super detailing a locomotive, for example, the process has changed for sure. The blue box models of yesteryear where they ran like junk out of the box, that time frame's gone. The models that you're pulling out of a box these days are usually pretty well detailed, depending on what you're getting. There's the Walthers mainline ones out there. There's the Athearn line that's not Athearn Ready to Roll anymore, but just Athearn. But even those sorts of locomotives have a good amount of detail. So it's really about putting it over the top at this point. And that comes in a couple of different aspects these days. There's still a little bit of work that can be done with super detailing to get right down to the, road number specific detail. Maybe there was a turbo fire and there's all sorts of scorch marks along the long hood, and one of the doors has been replaced with a primered door and stuff like that. Those little details are stuff that a younger modeler may pick up on and replicate in their model. But we're also talking about big leap in not just cosmetic differences, but audio differences as well. There's a lot of modelers out there that will gut the factory sound right out of the box and throw in a scale sound system speaker just because the fidelity of the sound you're getting out of those is so much better. And not only that, but if you've got an ESU Loc programmer, you can be doing custom sounds as well. You can literally take a recording or a video of the locomotive out on the tracks and rip up that sound file and put the exact horn from that locomotive on your model of it. And this is the sort of super hyper detailing that younger modelers are doing these days.
Yeah, which seems to be very technology driven as well, which is what they've grown up with. I mean, what I grew up with is certainly, even now, I'm 10 years, 15 years ahead of you. And, and then you look back and then you're looking at people that are, 10 years behind you. And then the technology they've been exposed to right from really the cradle, that they've been able to touch is now getting into the model railroad space.
Yeah. And for the record, I'm still old enough to remember dial-up internet. So it's, it's not like I'm a spring chicken myself. And I joked about that in my presentation that I'm officially 30 this year, which for a lot of younger modelers means that I am over the hill. The amount of technology that they've had at their fingertips from the very beginning is really, it's an advantage for them that unfortunately some of the older modelers don't have, but they're taking full advantage of it. Dennis Colucci, for example, he scratch built a depot that was in his hometown of Hopewell, New York, and he couldn't find the right roof supports. So he drew them up in a CAD program, sent them to a good friend of mine, Rick Rubino, and Rick printed them out on his 3D printer, sent them back to Dennis, and Dennis had them on the model and ready to be judged at the NER convention in October, which was pretty darn cool.
Yeah, that's for sure. We're going to get into 3D printing because that's a whole other part of this evolution of model railroading. But before we leave there, it also seems, we talked about, the super detailing, the installing DCC and better sound systems and adding lighting features. And if it's got a light bulb anywhere on the locomotive, it seems to light up now. And that seems to be wildly important. The functionality of these locomotives and the super details, even on the rolling stock. One of the other evolutions that seems to be is the entrepreneurial spirit of younger model railroaders with the freelance thing. And we've talked about that a lot here on the podcast. We've talked about the world of home shops and freelance forums out at the Colorado Rail Proto Meet, and lots of stuff that have been touched in the freelance world. And it seems like that's a pretty big wave amongst younger model railroaders as well.
Yeah. And you know what, quite frankly, I think that places like home shops have a lot to do with that because they're able to produce freelance equipment right out of the box for these younger generations, which is pretty cool. But yes, freelancing is cool again.
Yeah.
There's a lot of younger modelers doing just that. I'm part of a group of younger modelers who are, kind of communicating with each other through apps like Discord and throwing freelance ideas off of each other, helping to develop our freelance stories, which has been really cool, making sure that they all seem plausible, giving each other tips as far as custom painting is concerned. All three of the individuals that I mentioned in my presentation, Brandon, Garrett and Dennis, all three have their own freelance model railroads, and we've not only mapped them out so that we understand where they are geographically with each other, but we've gone as far as thinking about, the types of cars that they could be interchanging with one another. For me, my freelance has a big salt mine, and all three of their freelances exist within the Northeast. So municipalities everywhere can be getting salt cars off of my freelance and vice versa. You've got Garrett with this really cool idea where his is set in the future by about 5 years. And the opportunities that creates are really fascinating as far as battery electric hybrid locomotives and these sorts of things. So not only is he doing super detailing for modern locomotives and trying to match prototypes, but he's trying to imagine what a locomotive is going to look like in 5 years. And in today's day and age, you never know what it's going to look like in 5 years, because some of the stuff that's coming out of Wabtec and Progress Rail is pretty incredible.
You mentioned that Home Shops is helping get freelance railroading more available to folks, but your opinion, what do you think is behind the drive for freelance railroading, especially amongst younger model railroaders?
I think it's something that Chris Palmieri does himself, which is the ability to tell stories on paper and make them feel like a real railroad. This is another place where modelers with limited space can create an entire world for themselves, and it just exists in a Google Doc, that sort of thing. It's still modeling. You're still researching and coming up with things that make sense that would have happened in the real world, but you don't need space to do it. You can custom paint those locomotives and plop them down on the club layout, and it still makes sense that they're there and that sort of thing.
Speaking of clubs and being able to connect with other people, let's talk a little bit about the availability and the current evolution of modular and portable model railroading and what's available out there and what's made this a lot easier. I mean, not only the ability to find people, because the internet has definitely helped that, but now these new standards that have been able to make this a lot more accessible to folks.
Yeah, as far as modular model railroading is concerned, there is literally a modular standard out there for every single skill level. You've got people building incredibly detailed Fremo modules in both N scale and HO, are huge. There's a guy that'll be at Springfield this year that's got a model of, I believe it's the Staruca Viaduct, like 1-to-1 scale, absolutely massive. And then you've got all the way down to T-Track modules from folks like Klondike, where you don't need a single power tool in order to put those together. You literally need glue and painter's tape in order to put those together. And you're off and running as far as a modular standard's concerned. You can bring that to a meet, plug it in together with other T-Track modules, and you've got yourself a great community of model railroaders with, that takes up it, and your quote unquote layout at home takes up, 2 feet in a closet. So very compact as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, it's a great way to network community, especially like you said, if you can build a module that you can go home and run it as a little switching layout, but then be able to pick it up, throw it in the car, take it to an event where a bigger space has been rented out, or a train show that's invited, or you've been able to get some space at, set them all up. And now you've got big running, and then you got some small running. You get the best of both worlds. And then, the community that comes along with it.
Yeah. The modular model railroading communities are absolutely incredible. They're filled with people who know an amazing amount about not just model railroading, but modular model railroading, because it's its own separate beast as far as that's concerned. There are do's and don'ts as far as what you can do on a modular layout compared to a home layout. And they're there to make sure that things run well in person. But the people that come along with those modular setups are usually there to lend a hand, to give you tips. And usually, if you're coming with a new module, it leaves the show running better than it came, because those people are so willing to lend a hand and lend resources too. There's guys that show up at these meets with boxes and boxes of spare parts in case something goes wrong, which unfortunately happened to me at my first Fremo meet. I didn't realize that the accessory bus for Fremo was actually AC, and that I needed a converter to go from AC to DC to power my tortoises. I got bailed out by somebody who had a AC to DC converter there, and I was able to use that to make sure my modules ran. And it's it's because the community is so willing to lend a hand that makes it so great.
Yeah, I agree. It really is about the people, and the trains are the caveat, but I mean it's really the people that make this hobby really, really awesome. We mentioned it a little bit before, and I know this is one of the bigger topics as far as like technology is concerned, is the ability and the increasing of 3D printing and laser cutting and the tools that are now available that really help supplement model railroading. And I say the word supplement because I really like the words of Kevin Tully, where he talks about his products at Tully Models are not designed to replace scratch building and the modeling process. They're there to enhance it. And I know that that's what the younger generation is using it for as well. Isn't that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Garrett and Dennis both, in the presentation are using 3D printing as supplementation for scratch building and super detailing. Garrett with those cabooses with the 3D printed detail for that, and Dennis with his 3D printed roof supports. And that sort of thing is now really commonplace. In fact, our friend John Farrington is working on a project for myself and the rest of the Circa modelers right now with a 3D printed project for some two-bay salt hoppers, which we're really excited about. And, the ability to supplement a factory model is really convenient as far as 3D printing is concerned. It can take a model that, unfortunately is one detail off from being believable for something like salt hauling and make it 100% accurate for that sort of duty.
We just had Scott Thornton on Around the Layout podcast live just a few nights ago, and he was showing us Plasticity XYZ, which is the software he's using to do 3D design for 3D printing. And my big takeaway from that was, oh boy, that's a hobby within the hobby. But the second part was, it's not a snap of the finger to create these products. It's a talent all its own to be able to use CAD, to be able to draw, to know to take the measurements. So really the process of this that's been replaced is really goes from opening the package of styrene to sending it to the printer. But the design process is just as, or perhaps even more complicated.
Yeah. That the process of learning a CAD software can be really intensive. I haven't picked up CAD software since high school, but I remember how hard it was. That's for sure. It's not something that's easy to learn, and I have an immense amount of respect for the guys who are doing this, semi-professionally or just as a hobby, because I understand how difficult it is. But the great thing about it is not only is it a hobby within a hobby, but much like scratch building is concerned, there's resources out there that allow you to pick up these sorts of software as long as you're willing to put in the effort. YouTube is just as much as it is useful for learning how to do specific model railroading tasks. It's also very useful for picking up something like SolidWorks or any sort of other computer-aided design software. That's for sure.
And I think the older generation, I know that there is this stigma about 3D printing, and I've seen it in some places where it's frowned upon, like it's not quote unquote real modeling. And I challenge that all day long. It's just a different type. It's just a different tool being used, but it is modeling for sure, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I bet you if you asked Kevin Tully the amount of man hours he's got into the design elements, as far as, each one of his elevators is concerned, I bet you it's pretty darn comparable to the amount of time it would take to scratch build a structure like that.
I want to kind of touch upon, because you had mentioned in the presentation, a little recap. We've had him on the show, which was Kinzer Hurt, and he came on and he kind of laid out a lot of this and kind of really gave us some great insight into what youth and model railroading is doing right now. 23 years old, just out of college, facing a lot of the challenges we mentioned before. He doesn't own a big piece. In fact, I believe he's still in an apartment, but he's finding ways and creative ways to use the space and in small spaces and then drill in on them in very amazing ways. And you pointed him out as another example of the direction that the hobby seems to be going.
Yeah, Kinzer is very clearly a talented modeler. I've been following him on Instagram for the last couple of months since his podcast came out, and you know I've seen his work on YouTube long before that. I had been a subscriber of his, and you know the amount of detail he goes into, you know, not just with the scratch built structures, but with the rolling stock as well. You know, he's matching an exact prototype as far as the graffiti's concerned. The locomotives, he's matching the exact, you know, detail parts that are on those. It's truly incredible. You know, he's working with a small space, but he is drilling down into a level of detail in that small space that few modelers have ever done before.
So let's try to tackle a little bit the bigger challenge of the relations between the old guard and the new guard when it comes to model railroading, because I know that the older guard has their heart in the right place. They want to see the hobby continue. They want to see model railroading be a hobby that lasts for years and years beyond them and generations beyond. And I think a big part of that is to start to accept and understand that it will continue, but it probably isn't going to look like the way you modeled in your heyday. It's going to look different. And again, going back to that saying that the hobby isn't dying, it's evolving. And like all good things that last, they evolve, they change. They're never the same as they were in the beginning. And I know that's what we're seeing in model railroading. Let's talk about that relationship and some of the things that the old guard could be doing to help the new guard and be able to share all of that experience that they have in a way that's going to be effective for that younger generation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think first and foremost, you have to go back to understanding that in order to have that knowledge pass from generation to generation, there first has to be a level of trust between the two generations. And right now, for younger modelers, it is easier for them to find that level of trust in somebody online that they can see the results of. But that doesn't mean that an older modeler has to be discouraged and, you know, assume that a younger modeler has no interest in ever understanding anything that they have to offer. It just means that older modelers need to rethink the way that they are approaching younger modelers. You know, unsolicited feedback with no offer to help improve is just probably the easiest way to ever turn a modeler away from the hobby in general, much less, you know, any sort of scratch building or, you know, custom detailing, that sort of thing. So it's really important, first off, that you don't give unsolicited feedback to a person that you just met at an RPM or at a convention or at a show, because it's going to be a really ineffective way to connect with them. Instead, it's really important that modelers spend some time getting to know younger modelers, ask engaging questions, ask what it is that a younger modeler is interested in within the hobby, ask if there's something that they've been wanting to work on for their prototype. Maybe there's information that you have in a book in your collection that would really help them, but you're never going to know that unless you're able to sit down and ask those engaging questions rather than immediately jumping into giving feedback that they may not be looking for.
I've been asked before, you know, what do you think that youth and model railroading need? And my answer is very simple. Ask them. You know, that's the thing. Ask the question, right? What is it that you need? And I think another very important piece of this is relatability. They're not going to model the way you want to model. Relate to the way they want to model. Remember that what they're seeing in their world is different from what you saw in your world. And my example of that is the younger folks that hit trackside now, unless you go up to the Finger Lakes and you see those, you know, B23-7s, if you're going out on CSX, you're seeing modern equipment going up and down the rails. And this is a lot of what they're rail fanning. They're not going to relate so much to the older because they just didn't live it like you did. And there's exceptions to that rule. Of course, there are some, you know, some younger folks with some old blood in them that really love that old stuff. But for the most part, they're going to relate to what they see. And I think it's important that the older folks relate to what the younger folks are relating to as well.
Exactly. And much like the older generation is modeling what they saw as kids, the younger generation's doing that too. It's just that they saw, for me, it was wide cab dash nines and SD70Ms. And for, some of the younger guys now, it's tier 4 Gevos left and right, which, to some is really boring, but to them, that's what they've grown up seeing. And it's what they want to be able to replicate in their models. So focusing on the ability to replicate what you enjoyed seeing as a kid is the most important factor there, not necessarily what it was you were seeing as a kid. The back in my day sort of discussion is not really effective there as much as it is understanding the passion that's behind what it was that you saw when you grew up.
What would be your advice for an older person who sees a modeler perhaps struggling, and what would your recommended approach be for that person?
Well, first I would say, if a younger modeler has let it be known that they're struggling with something, ask engaging questions, ask what it is that they're struggling with, and make sure that you have a good understanding of that. And then rather than giving them feedback about how something should be done, think about the resources that you have at your disposal that could help them. If a younger modeler has some sort of, custom painted equipment that they didn't have access to an airbrush at home or something like that, and they rattle canned it and maybe it doesn't look quite good, let them know, hey, I've got an airbrush at home, and if you ever want to stop by, I'm happy to give you a crash course on how to use it. Providing resources is a great way to begin that transfer of knowledge from generation to generation.
Solid mentorship lasts forever, doesn't it?
Absolutely. There's multiple people within my life that I've been able to establish trust with first, and now I'm never afraid to go to them for advice on these sorts of things. And it's usually incredibly easy once I've gone to them for advice to do the thing that I'm looking to do.
We'll dive into something a little personal with you as far as what you're into. And they say that younger folks aren't interested in participating in organizations, but you prove that wrong, don't you?
Yeah. Last year, I got asked if I wanted to step up to be the assistant superintendent of the Lake Shores division, and I said I'm happy to do so. And when I did that, I immediately came in the door and hit the ground running. The division is thriving, thankfully, already, but I had a lot of ideas as far as how I could make it better for younger modelers, and we're really right in the midst of implementing those sorts of ideas now, which I'm incredibly proud of.
Why don't you talk about that? If another division was listening right now and they're saying, boy, it'd be great for us to be able to attract younger members and get younger folks more involved with our region or our division, or even if it was a club that said, hey, we really want to get some younger members. What are some of the things that they could be doing to help foster that?
Well, I think first and foremost, I think one of the things that's helped my division a lot is I actually gave this presentation. I think it's important that every single member of an organization has a good understanding of what it is that younger modelers are facing. That's huge. You then start to think about what are the resources that the Lake Shores division can provide younger modelers in order to get them interested. Now, we're actually really lucky here in the Lake Shores division. We've got a college model railroad club in the Rochester Institute of Technology right in our division. So we've got access to a bunch of younger modelers, and we can really help provide them resources in a lot of really cool ways. I think really quickly, it's important to mention that unfortunately, the RIT Club is losing their layout space, and they do have a petition up for people to sign. They're trying to get as many signatures as they can to give to the college, and hopefully they're able to save that space. But in the meantime, we've started to include them with as much as we possibly can within the Lake Shores division. We met them at RIT and did a joint T-Track module build session with them. So every single member of their club was able to select either a curve or a single straight module, and we built them right there on campus. And thank you very much. I have to also thank Sean Klondike for helping us with those modules, because he gave us a great deal because he knew it was a great cause. But that's just the start of it. We also have allowed them to be a part of our ops weekend, Op Around the Clock. We gave them 6 slots for Op Around the Clock, and I think we ended up having like 7 or 8 guys take advantage of that just because they chose one layout instead of 3 and kind of shared the slots evenly amongst themselves. And then we're also going to be doing the Rochester RPM this year, coming up in February 20th and 21st, if anybody's interested. But at the RPM, we're going to be doing a whole lot of clinics and learning tables that are going to be facilitated by younger modelers. We're giving them a platform to share what it is that they love about this hobby. Garrett Lester, one of the guys that I talked about in my presentation, is going to be doing he's going to be doing a learning table on ESU sound file programming, getting into the nitty gritty as far as detailed sound files are concerned. Dennis Colucci is going to be doing one on the intro to building a T-Track module, which is pretty awesome. And then Brandon is very big into Fremo, is going to be giving a learning table on ModuOps, which is the software that Fremo Meets use to facilitate their operations. So we're giving them a platform in order to share what it is that they are passionate about within the hobby.
Well, it's awesome. It's awesome that you folks got involved with the RPM wave that is sweeping the nation. And, it's been going for quite some time. And I'm a huge fan of the RPM format. I love the fact that it really is about the modeling and about the folks who model and that information sharing that goes on there. It really is a gathering of no kidding model railroaders who just are really in depth about the hobby and love to share information. So that's fantastic. You got that going on in Western New York, and that's certainly one to get on your schedule if you can make it anywhere from. Oh boy, that's a good location. You think about like Ohio, Pennsylvania. It's very achievable. New England can get out there and in a less than a half a day trip kind of thing. So that's going to be a lot of fun to see that evolve out there, and a great way to get younger folks involved and even older folks and everybody else in between, whenever or wherever they're starting the hobby, be able to go out and share and learn from those that are into the hobby and have a lot of knowledge to share and have a platform for it.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to it. It's looking like it's going to be a really fun event. My Layout will be operating as a part of the event. So if anybody's interested, you can come operate My Layout as a part of it. We'll have Fremo there on site. So anybody that's interested in operations will be able to operate right there on site without missing a single beat. It's going to be pretty incredible. Looking forward to it a lot.
Let's wrap all of this up by asking, what is the state of model railroading right now? And is the hobby in good hands?
The hobby's absolutely in good hands. There's no doubt about it. The younger generation of modelers is coming in. They're still doing the things that the older generation did with the scratch building and the super detailing. It's just that those acts look a lot different than they did 20 to 30 years ago. And, that the skills can still be transferred over. They're still valuable, but we just need to make sure that we're connecting in the right way in order to make sure that happens.
Well, excellent. I appreciate you coming on and sharing all of this with us and kind of giving us a great insight to the way the hobby has evolved, especially in the last, say, 10 to 15 years and how it's continuing to evolve. And now hopefully that'll give some folks some better insight to be able to relate to it. We did ask the question of the month tied to this, and we asked, as a new modeler, what inspired you to progress in the hobby? We asked you to tell us who or what fueled your ambitions in 90 seconds or less. We had a lot of bashful folks this month because we had 3 entries, but really good entries to the question of the month. And we're going to listen to those. And if you want to be heard on Around the Layout podcast, go to aroundthelayout.com/question. The question of the month is posted there. You hit the record button, you record your answer. Again, 90 seconds or less. And then you could hear yourself on Around the Layout podcast. So let's dive into these answers, Paul, and see what we can do. And I think we're going to hear some very familiar voices. Let's start with Eddie Bedingfield.
Hey, Ray, what's going on? Eddie Bedingfield here from Delanco, New Jersey. And the thing that has helped me progress in the hobby and frankly helped me enter the hobby has been the support of my wife. So for context, I'm 35 years old. I've been in the hobby for 2 years, and I've had a lifelong love of trains. When I was a kid, I had a couple different train sets, but never a physical layout. But when I turned 12, 13, model railroading became chiefly uncool, and it remained that way into my 20s. So fast forward to the end of November of 2023. We are expecting our son in March of 2024. And it's our last childless Christmas. My wife turns to me and goes, "Hey, I think it would be really cool if we started the tradition of having a train set under the tree." And I look at her and go, "Yep, I agree." So she thinks I'm going to go to Home Depot and go pick out something out there. But I end up going to the local hobby shop and getting a Bachmann N-scale starter set and watching that run around the tree for 2 days before I finally turn to her and go, "Hey, I really think I'm going to throw some money into building a layout." And she looks at me and she says, "Hey, you do you. I'm fully here to support you." So with that support to be chiefly uncool and do that, I entered the hobby. So rest is history. But anyway, hope you guys have a good one, and I'll see you around.
Well, Eddie, that's pretty awesome and great to have the support of the spouse. And, one thing that we haven't really talked about here, Paul, but I think it's really important is the support from home. And whether it be a spouse or significant other, or even for the younger folks, the parents getting involved. And even if they don't love model railroading, being able to help support the hobby for someone who's young.
So, Ray, I'm going to take the opportunity here to do something that I should have done in my original episode with you, because my wife got after me pretty hard about this. But I do need to recognize my wife for being incredibly supportive of it. She mentioned after listening to my initial episode that it didn't seem like I mentioned that very much, and I felt very bad about that. So let me just be very clear, Brittany. I very much appreciate how supportive you are of me in this hobby. I very much appreciate the amount of time that you allow me to spend on this hobby, and I appreciate all of your support in allowing me to travel all over the Northeast to participate in model railroading events. So thank you. But yes, absolutely, Eddie is right that the support of loved ones and friends can be very, very helpful in allowing us to thrive in the hobby. Without friends, this hobby isn't as fun as it could be. The lone wolf modeler never gets as much enjoyment out of this hobby as somebody who's got the support of loved ones and friends, whether it be parents, a significant other, or just friends encouraging them to push themselves further to be better modelers.
Well said. Well, we said his name 3 times, so I think he shows up here. Let's go to Wappingers Falls, New York.
Hey, all. My name is Dennis Colucci. I'm from Wappingers Falls, New York. And when I was first getting the hobby especially, but continuing to this day, one of the biggest things that has inspired me to progress and to improve is watching videos on YouTube, actually. Maybe it's because of how old I am, or maybe it's because of the generation that I'm a part of, but for me, watching videos on YouTube has always really pushed me to improve, finding new techniques on how to do weathering, new styles of how to do scratch building or build kits or build buildings or paint kits or paint buildings, to, finding these freelance railroads on YouTube and inspiring me to kind of develop my own thing. Some of the names that I, quickly grabbed off my YouTube subscription list include people like the Brakeman 17, DeBob's N-Scale Man Cave, Mike Pfeiffer, NS Modeler 24. These people inspired me to really keep going in the hobby and get really, really into the depth of the hobby that I've gotten into. So it's been a ton of fun to follow some of them on their journeys and kind of grow along with them. Thanks so much for the show, Ray. Can't wait to hear the episode, and hope you guys are doing well. See you at Amherst.
Well, Dennis, looking forward to seeing you at Amherst. And, we talked about mentorship earlier, and really the mentorship really has kind of gone to the content creator a bit too. And that's where Dennis is talking about all these really great content creators. And then in turn, the folks that have been inspired by content creators are becoming content creators themselves. So it really helps further that evolution.
Absolutely. I've mentioned it a couple of times on my YouTube channel, but I was a content creator doing stupid things on YouTube long before I was a model railroader on YouTube. And it's kind of the love of YouTube that got me back into the hobby. I discovered channels like NS Modeler 24 and Railfan 220, Cam Neely, early on in my college life, and really started to see their passion coming through the hobby. And some of those early how-to videos from people like NS Modeler 24, Josh Clark, are what helped me progress as a modeler. He had some really useful tutorials on like renumbering a locomotive and I think he had a couple on weathering and that sort of thing that really helped me to learn and establish trust, like I've mentioned throughout the podcast, with somebody that I could see the results and see what they were doing. So I knew that my results were hopefully at the very least going to be somewhat resemblant to theirs. But I do just also have to mention that if I was going to have a list of modelers that I enjoyed watching online, Dennis, Mr. N-Scale Train Boy, would be towards the top of that list.
Awesome. Yeah, well, he does a great job. And it takes a lot of courage to stick your head out there and share this as well. I mean, the world is full of critics, and to be able to have the confidence to stick your head out and put it out there for the general consumption of people, even in older folks like Ted DiIorio doing his weathering. And, it takes bravery to do that, because there's always going to be somebody's going to say, I can do it better, or you're doing it wrong, or this or that. And it's a shame that happens, but, encourage those people to continue to share their hobby, because you can learn so much from it.
Absolutely. It takes bravery and humility, because there are times where you get proven wrong. And usually if you're willing to take the advice of somebody who does do it better from you online, you end up with some much better results. That's for sure.
And for our final answer, let's head to Switzerland.
Hi, Ray. My name is Robin and I'm from Switzerland. So the answer to the question, what gives me the biggest inspiration to progress in the hobby, kind of like comes down to three main sources for me personally. So on one hand, it all started when I found the books of Pelle Søborg, and a little bit later on, I found the books of Lance Mindheim. And really, these books were kind of like the number one source for me to finally really read myself into the aspect of modular building. So without the possibility to have a big layout, I really wanted to do something. And those books were the kind of like number one inspiration for me to finally start modules, to at least have something to run my trains on. Then also my number two source of information and inspiration are the YouTube channels like NSModeler24, Seaboard Central, John Farrington. Really, those guys were a huge boost for me to start something and to build something. And then on number one, we have the people that I met over here in Switzerland. Fantastic guys over here. My number one source of information and also of inspiration. And we finally also have a group of modulars together, and we also had different meetings where we set up our modules. And really, that group became a very good friendship. And those guys are really awesome, and we inspire and support each other. And it really comes down to number one is the people that I met here.
Yeah, that's for sure. And thank you so much, Robin, for sharing that with us. And we had an amazing interview with Robin Felder, and he talked about a lot of things he mentioned here, the ability for him to build a community, connecting with other model railroaders, using the internet to find them, and then using YouTube as inspiration to learn more. Again, the amazing resources that are available to all modelers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope that Josh Clark, Mr. NSModeler24, is incredibly proud, because he is the voice of a generation. It seems like, as we're reviewing these answers, it seems like a ton of modelers, not just myself, found his videos inspirational, and it does genuinely seem like he spurred on a generation of content creators who are now carrying on that legacy of connecting with one another online and sharing their ideas through places like YouTube.
So I'll ask the question of the month one more time to our guest, Paul Stamp. Paul, as a new modeler, what inspired you to progress in the hobby?
What inspired me to progress in the hobby was pretty similar to a lot of the responses here. It was connecting with people online. I made a lot of great friendships there in the early part of my modeling career. Found a local Facebook modeling group that had some modelers in there that were a similar age to me, and connected with them and started running trains with them on a regular basis. And, they were into the same things as me. Custom renumbering and sound installs and all this other stuff. And, we formed a collaborative group and pushed each other to become better modelers. And as that's progressed, I've taken a lot of those relationships offline and met people in person, and really enjoyed, connecting with modelers throughout the Northeast now. It's been an incredible journey. Every time I connect with somebody new, I learn something new and I become a better modeler for what I've taken from them.
Well, very awesome stuff, Paul. We appreciate you coming on the podcast, sharing a little bit about the evolution of model railroading. And it's great to hear that the hobby is in great hands. I am certainly a believer in that. And I certainly believe that, again, the hobby is not dying. It's evolving. It's evolving into a great place that adapts to the way life is right now. I know that you're a big part of that and helping encourage other younger model railroaders or older model railroaders or everybody else in between and getting involved in the model railroading community to do that. So thank you for that. And thank you for coming on Around the Layout podcast.
Thanks for having me on. It was a blast.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's episode, check out past shows, and much more on our website, aroundthelayout.com. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at aroundthelayout.com/crew. Follow us on social media, aroundthelayout.com/social. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout.